Recording. So today we are going through a lot of material. We have two sets of presentations, and the first one is going to be on kritanna-varga. It's about preparation of food grains from Bhava-prakash. So Bhava-prakash is a very old text. It is at least I'm going to say about 500 to 600 years old. It is actually, there's some influence of the, Europeans had already started landing in India by that time. And so there's some influence there. Mostly these are very authentic, old recipes. And it has a focus on the Ayurvedic impact of different types of preparation methods. So let's get started with that. So this is from chapter 6 of Bhava-prakash, chapter 6, section 12, kritanna-varga. This is the edition that we're using. It's from volume 1. It's the Varanasi edition of Bhava-prakash, the translation by Professor K.R. Srikantamurti, and it's published by Chaukamba Krishnadas Academy in Varanasi, dated 2011. I put some information there. If you're interested in getting the source text, you can get it through Nataraj Books in Springfield, Virginia in the US. You may also find it on Amazon. So this is about the processing and cooking of food. A very nice cover picture that we have from one of our students. And what are the therapeutic and healing purposes of the different methods of cooking food? So, this is always a fun topic. I love going over this. Let's start with bhakta. Now, bhakta is a really basic thing. It's basically a way of preparing boiled rice or making a rice porridge. It is extremely digestible. It is fairly easy to make. Basically, it's a very soft rice. You wash rice, you soak it for 10 to 30 minutes, and you boil it in 5 times the volume of water. Now, meaning that if I have 1 cup of rice, I'm using 5 cups of water. So it's going to become very mushy, and it's going to become frothy. The frothy part is drained out. There are actually, you can make a drink from that frothy part, from that rice water. If you have it warm, you can add some ghee, cumin, and turmeric. It will increase the digestive fire. It will help the taste. So if there is a problem, aruchi is a condition where I don't really have much of a taste. If someone, let's say, is recovering from an illness, you could give them this with just a little bit of ghee and a little bit of cumin and turmeric. It's going to be very mild. It's not going to be spicy, but it's going to actually help taste. It's going to get the taste going. Sometimes you don't feel like eating anything, and someone will put something in front of you, and you taste a little bit, and then you start to feel like having something. Ajinana also, if someone has trouble digesting, this is one of the easiest things to digest. Very easy. If it's consumed cold, it's going to be hard to digest. It'll cause loss of taste and increased kapha. It is not something that you want to have cold. It should be served warm or hot. Now, this is not the normal way of cooking rice where you have grains separate. It becomes a bit mushy. You can also prepare something in the rice cooker. If you are preparing brown rice, you can use, like 4 times the volume of water instead of the recommended 3 times the volume of water. And your brown rice will have very split grains, and they'll be very, very soft and not that chewy consistency that you sometimes get if you have brown rice in a restaurant. Here's the basic boiled rice recipe, and this is the traditional way of making it. Again, you can also accomplish this with a rice cooker. Wash 1 cup of white rice, you soak it in cold or room temperature water for 30 minutes. You bring 5 cups of water to a boil. You drain the soaked rice and discard the soak water and add it to the boiling water. Stir it until it comes to a boil. You cook it for at least 15 minutes until the rice has become fully expanded and soft. Now, it's very important when you have this larger proportion of water, the rice is soaking up. The dry rice grains are not only cooking, they are also soaking up that water. And you're going to end up with a very thick water. So you can drain the rice water and you can save it. Then you can add 1 tablespoon of ghee and half a teaspoon of turmeric powder. Alternatively, you could heat 1 tablespoon of ghee in a separate small pan and brown half a teaspoon of whole cumin seeds in the ghee, and then you add it to the cooked rice and mix it in. You serve it warm or hot with salt or salty preparations on the side. That way people can mix salt to taste. We really don't want to oversalt things. If you have some salt that's available and someone has a taste for having a little bit more salt or less salt, they can adjust it individually. Salt is a taste enabler, so it's good to have it in the right quantities. Notice that rice is served hot. Reheating rice is really not recommended. It's always better to cook fresh rice. Cooking rice, especially if you have a rice cooker, is fairly easy. You know, and you can, if you're a busy person, you can set this up in a rice cooker in the morning and set the delay timer, and then you can have hot, fresh cooked rice when you come back. Yeah, rice cookers are a shortcut, but they are really handy. And using a rice cooker, you can actually get a lot of the effect of these traditional ways of cooking simply by adjusting the amount of water. You know those little recipe books that come with rice cookers? You could basically throw it out and you can write down your own recipes. You know, you can go with a basic 2-to-1 is going to give you very nicely separated rice grains. Using a little bit more than 2-to-1, meaning 1 cup of rice and 3 cups of water in the rice cooker, it will all be absorbed. It might be just a little bit wet and sticky, and that's actually going to be easier to digest, even though it'll be just a little bit mushy. Same thing with brown rice, 4-to-1, definitely, absolutely 4-to-1 with brown rice, and use the whole grain setting on the rice cooker. And that's going to give you a nice split grain rice, not chewy at all. Okay, basic lentil soups, dals. This is called dali in Sanskrit. So dali, or dal, as it's called in modern India, is prepared by soaking the dal beans overnight. Soaking is a very good thing to do. You can cook most dals without having soaked them, but if you do soak them, they will cook better. They will have more beneficial properties. They will also have a chance to become activated, and it's going to increase the nutritional value. If you don't have time to soak it, that's fine. You can always just take yellow split mung. Yellow split mung is so fast and easy to cook. Literally, you can make yellow split mung dal start to finish in about 25 minutes. But it's always better to soak overnight. So you basically soak your dal beans. You boil in water with salt, fresh ginger, and some asafoetida. Asafoetida helps to get rid of the vayu. Any kind of beans will tend to have vayu, and they can give you gas. And the Sanskrit name for soup is soup. Big surprise there. If you take dal cold, you'll have flatulence and constipation. It must be taken warm, and you should use dehusked dal for this. There's also generally some oil or ghee added as well. So this is a mung dal. This is a yellow split mung dal soup that's taken during a wellness regimen. So if you're trying to do a cleanse, you know, you can just have a very simple dal. You can add a little bit of turmeric and ginger and salt and just a little bit of olive oil or ghee, and this is going to be very cleansing. People in India, sometimes if someone is preparing to do a ceremony or if they're doing a fast, they're doing a cleanse, sometimes people will take a simple preparation made of rice and yellow mung beans boiled together until it becomes a little mushy, and just add a very small amount of salt and a very small amount of ghee and some turmeric. And this is actually a cleansing thing to have. It's not super tasty, but it's very edible if you have it warm, and it will be very easy to digest, and it's actually cleansing. So, you know, here's a basic soup recipe. Take half a cup of yellow split mung dal, wash it, soak it overnight. Don't discard the soak water. Bring to a boil, and then you discard the foam. Some foam comes up on the top. We usually skim that off and discard the foam. If you cook it in 20 minutes in an open pot, or if it's a pressure cooker, it'll only take 10 minutes. And then the beans will be kind of starting to break apart a little bit. Again, this is for yellow split mung. Other types of dal take longer to cook. Take oil or ghee and heat it separately. Add about 1 tablespoon of minced fresh ginger and 1/8 of a teaspoon approximately of powdered hing. Always add the hing after the fresh ginger, otherwise it gets burnt. And then you immediately toss it into that soup. Whoop, I didn't need to go back. How did that happen? Here we go. So to get this final volume of about 3 cups, you might have to add a little water if necessary, and there should be about 1 teaspoon of salt. If you just cook it another few minutes after you've given the spice chunk in there, and you'll see that the beans are soft and breaking up, and there should still be a little bit of separation of the broth. That's it. Very, very simple. Krishara. So krishara is when we boil rice and lentils together as a porridge. And so I mentioned having krishara as a cleansing diet type of thing. This is very easy to digest. If you take unhusked rice and unhusked lentils, and you add them together and boil them after washing and soaking, and you boil them with salt, fresh ginger, and hingu. This will increase shukra dhatu, it will increase strength. It can be a little hard to digest. It will increase pitta and kapha. It will somewhat dull the intellect, and it will help eliminate stool. So it is better for vata. So a basic krishara recipe is if you wash 1 cup of brown rice and soak for 30 minutes. Again, this is something to give you fiber to help elimination. You can separately wash 1 cup of whole green mung. So yeah, I'm actually giving a recipe here that has more fiber in it. This is not the unhusked. This is the unhusked version. So it's a little harder to digest, but this is better for cleansing. You take 6 cups of water, bring it to a boil, drain the soaked rice and soaked dal, and then you add it to the boiling water. You heat up 2 tablespoons of ghee and add 1 tablespoon of minced fresh ginger, 1/8 teaspoon of hing. Add it, add about 2 teaspoons of salt, and you can cook it in a pressure cooker for 20 minutes, or if it's in a covered pot, for 45 minutes. Now, if you do the covered pot method, not using a pressure cooker, it will want to boil over because the rice thickens the water, and that thicker water has a higher viscosity, and it will bubble up and boil over like crazy. So if you walk away and you come back, and your stove is going to be a mess because it's going to be covered in hot, sticky rice water. And as that heats up more, it's not as bad as other things to get rid of, but it's messy. And just you may have to add some water if the mixture becomes too dry. So that's it. This is actually pretty easy to cook. Tapahari. Tapahari is very much like something you can get in Indian restaurants called vada. You take black lentils, like urd dal, and you are soaking them. You make into small balls with rice and fried with ghee and a little turmeric. This is just the translation of what's in the text. I have a recipe after this. It has a lot of protein. It increases kapha and muscle mass. It decreases pitta and vata. So this will be good for, pacifying vata. It's somewhat aphrodisiac. It can cause some flatulence. It can make your increased body mass somewhat. It's good for aruchi, and it's also good for lack of muscle mass. So basic recipe, take half a cup of urad flour. Urad flour is easily available in Indian groceries. If you have a hard time getting that, you should be able to get urad dal, and you should be able to grind it up if you have a grain mill. So take half a cup of urad dal and half a cup of rice flour, add half a teaspoon of turmeric powder and half a teaspoon of salt. You add cold water and then you mix it to make a thick paste. It should be kind of like a, it should be thick. It's going to be a little sticky. So you're going to have to wash your hands and keep them wet. And you can make little balls out of it. The illustration showed something that was more of in a donut shape. You could do that, but you can also just make a little ball. Fried in ghee on medium heat for about 4 to 5 minutes. The balls will turn reddish brown and they will be very hard and tough. Then you want to bring 2 cups of water to a boil, add 1.5 teaspoon of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon of asafoetida, and 1/2 a teaspoon of minced fresh ginger. Add the fried balls to the water, and then you simmer for 2 to 3 minutes on low heat or until the balls have become tender. Why do you do this? Because otherwise, if you have these fried balls, it's going to be kind of like chewing on bullets. They will be edible, not like chewing on bullets, but they will be very tough and very chewy, and also, frankly, they're going to be a little harder to digest. This part of putting them in the simmer in this water that has a little bit of salt in it, this will soften them. And if you overdo it, you'll know, because they'll start to break apart. Okay. Now, kshirika. Kshirika is also known as payasam or paramanna. The modern Indian word usually used is kheer. You take organic whole milk, non-homogenized, boil it and reduce it to half with basmati or easily digested rice added to it. Add sugar and ghee at the end. Optionally, you can add cardamom and saffron. Raisins soaked in water may be added at the end to increase ojas. It is difficult to digest. It is excellent for vata. It will pacify vata. It decreases tikshnagni. It mitigates pitta, and it is good for bleeding diseases. So this is a very popular preparation, and it is best had warm. People will have cold kheer as well. It's very, very tasty. It's a very popular dessert in India, but it's going to be hard to digest if you have it cold. So basic kshirika recipe, take half a gallon of, and you can reduce the proportion. You can just cut everything in half. But it's actually harder. Let me just warn you in advance. It is much harder to make a smaller quantity of kshirika than to make this quantity. So if you take half a gallon of preferably unhomogenized, but you can use homogenized because unhomogenized milk is very hard to get. But take half a gallon of unhomogenized organic whole milk, bring it to a boil. Boiling milk is a little tricky. You have to make sure it doesn't stick. Once it comes to a boil, it's usually okay. A thick bottom pot is always better. The pot should at least have a 4-quart capacity. And you really have to be aware of milk boiling over. When milk first comes to a boil, especially, it loves to just boil over. You have to really watch it. Once the milk is boiling, you don't need much stirring until the very end. Then you take about 6 tablespoons of white basmati rice, wash it, and add it to the boiling milk. You don't want to wash it and then let it sit and dry out. Otherwise, the rice grains tend to break up. Just wash it when you're ready to add to the boiling milk, and then after draining the rinse water. You want to stir it to make sure the grains don't clump together or stick to the bottom. Make sure that they're all boiling and floating freely in the milk. You need to adjust the heat so the mixture just remains at a rolling boil. Usually, this is when you turn the flame down. You can also cover it. You also want to wash a quarter cup of raisins and soak them separately. We're not going to put raisins in hot milk. That will tend to result in some curdling. The milk and rice mixture need to boil for at least an hour. You want to stir occasionally just to make sure there's no sticking on the bottom. Remember, once milk comes to boil, as long as you have fairly even heat, it's not too hot, and you have a thick bottom pot, it should not stick on the bottom. I've made kshirika in 30-gallon quantity where I was using a big, really big pot, and that can be very tricky. But once you get it boiling, it's just needs a little bit of attention, and it mostly does not require constant attention. As the mixture boils, the rice thickens the milk. To actually condense to 1/2 of the original amount is going to take a longer time. It may take about an hour and a half. You might not make it for that full hour and a half because as it begins to thicken, the tendency to stick is going to dramatically increase. As it begins to thicken, you can add 2 tablespoons of ghee and continue cooking until it's just too thick to manage. Or you might just lose patience. It's still, once the rice is very thoroughly cooked and once it's getting thick, it's already in an edible state. So it's up to you. Then you want to add 1/2 cup of unrefined sugar. You can also use slightly less. This is going to loosen the mixture every time you add a little bit of sugar. Cook for another few minutes after adding the sugar and then remove it. Add a large pinch of powdered cardamom. I recommend always using whole cardamom pods, shell them, and then thoroughly grind them in a mortar and pestle. You can optionally add some powdered saffron threads. And if you're adding the raisins, this is when you add them. You drain the raisins and you add it after the mixture has stopped boiling for 2 minutes. You just add those soaked raisins and mix it in, and you serve it warm. That's it. This is the traditional payasam or kshirika recipe. There are many different variants on this. I know there's a Tamil variant. I do not remember the name of the Tamil variant on payasam, but this is described in really ancient texts, and it's described in ancient texts like Bhagavad Purana, and it's also sometimes something that's offered as part of different ceremonies when there are special offerings that are made. It's a very traditional recipe. There are many temples you might go to where this is regularly offered to the deities and distributed as prasad. So, kshirika and other preparations. I'm not going to go into detail on these. There is lapsika, rotika. Rotika is roti. Everybody knows what roti is, kind of like the Indian tortilla or flatbread. There is something called angarakarkati, yavarotika. Yavarotika is simply a roti made with barley. Balabhadrika chamasi, dhumasi jharjhari chanaka rotika. Again, that is a roti made with bean flour. Pishtika, birdhamika, parpata. Parpata is papadum. You can buy these ready-made wafers, papadums that can be roasted or fried. They are made from usually urad dal. You can also get papadums that are made from other things. This is the Sanskrit name, parpat, and they are commonly called papadum. And you can roast them on an iron skillet, and they become crunchy and very tasty. It's a very healthy snack having roasted papadum, because literally they just roast very quickly within a minute. Purika. Purika is puri. It's basically a fried flatbread. You make a dough and then you roll it out and you fry it in ghee or oil. Vartaka is vada. That is like the previous preparation that described. There are many different variants of vada. There are some that are made with a softer flour rather than a paste, and then they are sometimes put in water or sometimes put in yogurt or buttermilk. Kanjika vartika. Kanjika vartika is when you take a carrot juice, black carrot juice that's slightly fermented, and you put the meaning fermented not to the point of becoming alcoholic, but to the point of becoming a little sour. And then you put the vata in that kanji. There is amla vataka that is made with green mango. Mudga vataka, that's made with mung dal. Mash vataka is made with urad dal. Kushmandaka vataka is made with pumpkin. And kwatata is boiled and spiced beetroot. So again, not a lot of detail on these. These are just some of the other preparations that are mentioned in kritanna-varga. Other things with some pictures. Narikela kshirika is a kshirika made with coconut. Sevika is vermicelli kheer. So you have basically these very fine wheat noodles, and those are cooked in milk. Samita is wheat flour, is a sweet preparation made with wheat flour. Mundaka is a pot cake. This is a picture of a halwa that's made with gourd. So basically a loki is a type of gourd, also called bottle gourd. Polika is a cake that's fried in ghee. So these are just some of the things that are described. There are so many things that are in kritanna-varga, and it is just, it was difficult to capture all of these. Again, some other pictures of some of these things that are mentioned. Now, that's a very interesting question. So almond milk, I believe you can try using that to make kshirika. It may be a little tricky. Part of the problem is if you make a fresh almond milk, if you take your own if you soak almonds, remove the outer skin of the almond, and then you blend them up and make your own almond milk, you will have better success with that than the stuff that you buy from the store, because they add thickeners. They add thickeners and a little bit of a sweetener to make it more tasty so that people can use it as a milk substitute. But for cooking, it's not going to work that well. The same thing is true for soy milk. Coconut milk is actually may work a little bit better. And there's a traditional Thai version of payasam that they make. They make the sweet coconut rice. That's rice cooked in coconut milk, basically. You definitely want to soak the rice overnight beforehand if you're going to try anything like that. And you're going to need to be patient, and it's going to tend to stick more. So you can experiment with that. I don't have a ready recipe. I suspect if someone is dairy sensitive, or if they are really hardcore vegan, you can also just use, I would say you're probably going to have better luck with getting a good coconut milk and starting with that. You can buy canned coconut milk. You can actually buy canned organic coconut milk at Trader Joe's in the US. And I'm sure there's other sources for it that are available. Coconut is actually a product that usually, regardless of whether it says organic or not, it usually does not have pesticides or genetic engineering or other things added to it. It is it's a fairly natural crop that does not require a lot of anything, although they tend to sometimes add some preservatives in coconut milk. So general methods for vegetables. So generally, you always wash the vegetables thoroughly and you cut them in small pieces. You generally, and this is just, this applies to most all vegetables. You heat a little bit of ghee, you add jitaka, cumin, hing, and other powdered spices, and then you add the vegetables, you add water as needed, and you cook until done. So here's an example of, what some cooked vegetables look like. This is a fairly typical type of vegetable preparation. You know, the pieces of cauliflower are cooked. If there's potato pieces, the potatoes should be soft. Some vegetables take a little bit longer than others to cook, and that's just something to be aware of. But this is the basic technique, and this is what's described in kritanna-varga, in Bhava-prakash, as the general technique for cooking vegetables. Another thing I should add is you always want to cook with the lid. When you cook with the lid, it keeps more heat, and it helps to reduce the vegetables from becoming too dried out, and it also helps them cook a little faster. How much hing do you add? Well, you know, you want to just get used to the adding hing. It's usually a fairly small quantity because hing is very pungent. You know, honestly, what I do is I'll have the hing there when I am heating the oil. I put my whole spices in, and then I'll put the shredded fresh ginger in, which cools down the hot oil. And then I take that little container of powdered hing and I'm going to sprinkle it in a couple of times, and I have basically a really large pinch. If it's a bigger quantity than I'm making, then I'm obviously going to use proportionally more hing. But you will have to use that and get used to the proportion. I'm giving this quantity of 1/8 of a teaspoon. Don't try to hold yourself to measuring that out. Just think of 1/8 of a teaspoon. It's kind of a really big pinch, okay? And you'll just get used to the quantity over time. More preparations. These are all things that are described, and not going to go into a lot of detail. Pakwana sadhana vidhi mantaka, sampava, karpura nalika, feni, Shashkuli, Sevika Modika, Mukta Modika, Beshana Modika, Dugda Kupika, and Kundalini. Kundalini is jalebi. Jalebi is actually a very old and traditional recipe. This is what they look like here. You can make jalebi with a mixture of rice and wheat flour, or with just white flour, and you let it sit and it's fermented. And as it ferments, it becomes it develops a sour smell. And then you have a thick batter. It's about like the consistency of a thick pancake batter. There is no leavening that's added for jalebi batter. But a really good jalebi batter has to be fermented just right. It's actually more like a sourdough. And then you have to force it through kind of a little funnel thing or a pastry bag directly into hot oil, and you make these coiled forms, and they get cooked and crispy, and the fermented property. Oh, baked veggies are amazing. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Jalebis, they form this tubular shape, and then you take that and you put it in a thick, hot syrup made from raw sugar and water. So it's a very popular thing. Unfortunately, it's hard to get really good jalebis. You can buy a ready-made jalebi mix, which cheats because they use baking soda instead of fermenting. It takes a good 24 hours to start jalebi batter. There's a famous place in Chandni Chowk in New Delhi that's famous for their jalebis. So I've heard. I haven't been there myself. And they supposedly have been keeping the same culture of their jalebi batter since, I don't know, 1920 something. It's like sourdough bread. And the same thing is true of places that are known for sourdough bread. Sevika modika, mukta modika, besan modika. This is besan modika. It is besan laddu. A laddu is called modika or modak. It is something where you take the roasted besan flour, and you take besan flour and you roast it with ghee. You add just enough ghee so that it makes a consistency like a cement mix. This first picture, this is jalebi. This is the modika. This is besan modika. Okay. And then after cooking it for some time, you can either take it off the fire and add powdered sugar, to make it into balls. You also add things like you can add ground cardamom, and you can add a little bit of ground cloves. You can add different herbs. There are some recipes in Ayurveda where we will actually make this based on the modaka, this laddu, and you want to use raw sugar. The best thing is to use jaggery. You can get raw sugar that is in cakes. You can actually get this from Mexico. I forget what they call it. It comes in these little cone shapes that you can buy in most Latino groceries in the U.S. It's very similar to gur, the gur that you get in Indian shops. But that can be used as a carrier for herbs. So there are some therapeutic things where we will take different herbs, different spices, some cardamom and other things, and put them together and make a based on modaka or a laddu, and you can give that to someone, and that will help with taste and so forth. So again, not a huge amount of detail on these, but this is all what's part of what's described. Now, there is also a section that describes the paschat parivesha. Paschat parivesha are things that can be consumed after a meal. So some of these include rasala, amrapala panaka. Amrapala panaka is actually, yes, that's right, piloncillo. Thank you, Pamela. And yes, these are very easy to find. Just about any supermarket in the Southwest U.S. or on the East Coast, you should be able to find these. So amrapala panaka is a mango syrup drink, and it is sometimes also called ampanna. I'll write that in here. So this ampanna is made from green mango, and that's what's featured in the picture here. In hot weather, this is a great thing to have. This is better than even lemonade, or the easy thing to make is the nimbuko phalapanaka. Nimbuko phalapanaka is also called nimbu pani. Basically, it means lemon water. So the lemons that you have in India are much more like the Mexican limes or key limes. They are not quite as sour as the yellow Meyer lemons and the big green limes that you have that are common in the US. They're smaller, they're rounder, they have a thinner skin, and they're not as intensely sour. So this is also called nimbu pani. And basically, it is a drink. It's very easy to make. Basically, take half a gallon of water, add maybe a teaspoon of salt, and you add not as much sugar as American lemonade. American lemonade is very, very sugary. Nimbu pani is is just mildly sweetened with a little bit of raw sugar, enough to counterbalance the sourness of those Mexican limes. So I might use, let's say, half a gallon of water, a couple of teaspoons of salt, and I might use 5 or 6 of those little Mexican limes that I am going to cut them in half and juice them up. And it's very refreshing. It's especially good in hot weather. It is cooling, and that adding a little bit of salt, basically, somebody decided that they were going to take something and they're going to use glucose and they're going to add some salts, and they market it as Gatorade and say, hey, when you're sweating a lot, you're losing electrolytes. So we're going to make an electrolyte drink and then charge you $3 for it. But you can also make that at home. Adding a little bit of table salt does make an electrolyte. It's not quite as balanced as if you have all these other things in it, but it actually is very good for hot weather. Amlika phalapanaka, you can also make a drink from amla. Amla is a very, sucanat is raw sugar. Sucanat is basically crystallized raw sugar. There is actually, you can actually now buy in Walmart organic Florida, organic raw sugar from Florida. So there are many different ways of getting natural sugar, naturally condensed sugarcane juice to use as a sweetener. Amla Thalapanika is basically making a drink with amla fruit. Now, the Amla Thalapanika, the mango syrup drink, you can actually buy this ready-made in Indian stores. You can also buy the syrup that you just basically add water to. It has everything, and all you have to do is add water. It's very tasty. It's especially good in hot weather. It has a little bit of black salt, some ginger, and some other spices in it, and it's really amazingly refreshing. Here it's being shown garnished with mint leaves, and it's naturally green in color. It is made from green mango. The nimbu phala, nimbu is, I'm sorry, nimbu, I already mentioned that. Amlika thalapanika is from amla fruit. Amla fruit are naturally sour and astringent. They are a prominent ingredient in many types of Ayurvedic jams, such as in the Chyavanprash. So Chyavanprash has amla fruit in it, along with many other spices and ingredients. And the drink made from amla, you can take dried amla or fresh amla and cook it and add some sugar and salt and make a drink from that. Amla is an amazing fruit which has a lot of healing properties, and it is used in many different preparations. Dhanya kapanika. Dhanya kapanika is made from barley, roasted barley. That is then made into a drink, and adding a little bit of sugar and salt. It has good digestive properties. Kanji. Kanji is a drink made from fermented black carrot juice. So it is a little hard to find black carrots. It is possible to get them. Getting the juice to ferment just right is something, honestly, I have not really done satisfactorily. I've tried to do it, and it's come out a little disastrous, and I think there's a trick to it. I haven't quite mastered that. So fermenting things can be just a little tricky. Jali is another type of drink made with roasted barley. Takra, buttermilk. So take 1 part of yogurt, mix it with 4 parts of clean water. And then you can separately take a little bit of hingu roasted in oil, add some roasted cumin and rock salt, make a paste, mix it in and churn it. And that's the traditional recipe for takra. It is actually good for digestion. And it's also good in, you can have a takra in even in colder weather. It's a good way of getting your, probiotic content. You can also use a blender to make that. If one feels burning sensation after a meal, if there is overactive Agni, having a small amount of warm milk can be taken. This is just a picture, saffron milk with crushed almonds for ojas, or with turmeric and nutmeg for sleep. If someone is having trouble sleeping at night, a very natural remedy, which you might have heard from your mom or your grandma, is have a little bit of warm milk at night, and it is actually good. And adding some turmeric and nutmeg can be good for if you wake up in the middle of the night tossing and turning. Obviously, the other thing is reduce your caffeine intake. Saktu is a drink that's made from grains which are dry roasted and then made into a powder. Some varieties are Yabashaktu, which is barley. Adding a little bit of ghee and sugar, it's cooling and it's good for the hot summer. Shali Saktu is a rice drink. It assists Agni, it's good for digestion, it's cold in potency, sweet. It tends to be a little constipating. It helps taste, it's good for health, it gives strength and increases shukra. There's a very popular rice drink in Mexico, and it's very tasty. It's just basically made with rice water. But people usually have it cold. You can have the shali saktu can be either had room temperature, it can be had cold, or it can be had warm. Sharkarodaka. So sharkarodaka is something that one has in small amounts. It's basically taking water, adding a little bit of raw sugar, adding cardamom cloves, and very small amounts of edible camphor and pipali. It's something that one can have after a meal. It will increase shukra, it's sweet, it mitigates vata and pitta. It's good for fainting, vomiting, burning sensation, thirst and fever, and for dehydration. One can also add rock salt and roses. It's something that helps one to feel somewhat refreshed after eating. Dhana is fried barley. On its own, it can be used not as a drink, but it can be had for nausea and vomiting. I don't have a recipe for preparing this, but it is good for mandagni. If you have husked barley that is fried, it will cause dryness, and it can be good for diabetes and kapha issues, and it can also be good for reducing vomiting. Holika are dry roasted lentils or cooked on a direct fire. And interestingly, there's a recommendation to use a fire of hay. It's going to be a kind of a slow burning smoky fire that is going to, cook over a longer time. It will be slightly vata increasing, and it will reduce kapha. So you can use a slow cooker, for example. You can use a slow cooker to have the same effect of cooking lentils over a time. So you basically can make a dal with lentils and then put it in a slow cooker, and then cook it over time. You can actually cook it overnight. You just have to make sure that you have enough water so it doesn't become completely dry. Uchi, unripe grains, which are either cooked or fried. So you can have a fresh corn cob or pearl barley that's cooked directly on fire. So one thing that actually is fairly easy to do, if you have a gas range, you can take a fresh corn cob and have it as low as you have the fire as low as you can go, and take the corn cob and roast it. And now, this is actually something that's very popular in the Southwest. It's popular in Mexico. It's actually very popular in India, is having the roast corn. You take a roast, an ear of sweet corn, and you roast it on a grill over a fire, and usually give it, 5 or 10 minutes. In India, people will often have that with a little bit of black salt and some other spice mixture on top of it. It will increase kapha and bestow strength. It is pacifying for vata and pitta. I think we've just about reached the end. Laja is paddy, fried or puffed. That is, you can have puffed rice, paddy meaning the rice that has been freshly harvested, not dried and husked yet. Chipita, purtika, kulmasha, palala, pinyaka. And that's it. We want to take a short break, and then we're going to do the other presentation, vari-varga. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so we're recording again, and that's the one I want. Okay, so this is another section, section 13 from chapter 6 of Bhava-prakash, is vari-varga. Vari-varga are the categories of water. Water is not all created equally. Water is not all the same from an energetic point of view, and also the analysis in Ayurveda varies depending on the source and the type of water. So let's talk about this. So water is described according to sources and how it's collected. The general principle is that water acquires some subtle properties of its environment. Some of the properties of vari-varga are measurable and quantifiable according to analytical science. Things like mineral content, pH, bacterial contamination, heavy metals, and other chemical contamination. Others are not. Others, when we talk about energetic properties of water, there are things that you can't put into a lab and say, here's a quantity. This water has a different energy than that water. Some people there's been a lot of investigation of water from different sources, analyzing its properties and so forth. And some people have sometimes made, claims. We're just going to say that there are energetic properties of water and leave it at that. We're not going to try to make some amazing claims. What are these synonyms for water, first of all? Aniya, salala, nira, kilala, jala, ambu, apa, vari, kam, toya, payas, patas, udaka, jivana, vana, ambha, arna, amrita, ghanarasa. These are all synonyms of water. Well, surprise, there are a lot of words for water in Sanskrit. Water can relieve fatigue, it relieves exhaustion, it's good for fainting, thirst, stupor, vomiting, and constipation. It gives strength, it wards off sleep, it's nourishing and good for the heart. It may carry concealed taste, or guptarasa. It mitigates indigestion, ajinana-shamaka. It's always beneficial, cooling, easy to digest, helpful with taste, and enlivening like amrita or nectar. So there's a lot of things that are said about water. Water is something we can't live with. We can go without food for many days. We can only live without water for just a few days. We require having water. Okay. So two basic types. So sages say that water is of two basic types. There is divya, or atmospheric water from the sky, and there is bhauma, terrestrial water from the earth. Now, someone's going to nitpick and say, well, it all comes from the sky, but in terms of how water is collected, these are the two basic categories. Divya is further divided into four subtypes. There's dharaja, which is rainwater from rain showers, and kadakabhava, water from melted hailstones, kaushara, water from condensation or dew, and haima, water from snowmelt. And of these, dharaja is best, the rainwater. Nowadays, as in very polluted environments, especially, rainwater can actually be sometimes harmful because, unfortunately, the environment has become very polluted. So this is assuming that we're living in a fairly pristine environment. And there are some parts of the world where, the water is very clean, the air is very clean, remote from sources of industrial pollution and so forth. So dharaja, what are the properties of dharaja, or water from rain showers? So when we say dhara, we're referring to a shower. It could be a torrential downpour or a light rain. This is not quite the same as a drizzling or heavy fog, which might produce water. That would be categorized as toshara. Rainwater should be collected through a clean cloth into a depression in rock, which was previously washed, or in a wide-mouthed vessel of gold, silver, copper, rock crystal, glass, or clay. And that is called dharajala. Notice that there are some specific materials which are recommended for collecting water. And energetically, there will be different properties. For example, if you collect rainwater in a copper vessel, that is going to have some Agni increasing properties energetically. Dharajala mitigates all three doshas. It has imperceptible taste, anirdesharas. So, usually water should not have a strong taste. If there's a strong taste to water, that's sometimes a signal that maybe there's something in there that shouldn't be. Water is easy to digest. It's cold in potency, strengthening, nourishing, satisfying, pleasing to the heart, enlivens digestion. Rasayana is the word used there. It stimulates intelligence. It also relieves fainting, stupor, burning sensation, exhaustion, and thirst. Water that's collected during the first rains of the season is especially good for health. So these are just some of the distinctions that are made with Dhara Jala water. There are two further subtypes of water. There is Ganga, or sweet drinking water. Why is it called Ganga? Because it is considered to come from the Akash Ganga, the celestial Ganga, through the clouds, released as rain during July to August, which is the peak of the rainy season in North India. It should be collected in gold, silver, or clay vessels. If you mix cooked rice with this water, it should not become slimy. It should keep its original color. This is just the description that's given for recognizing it. This water is called Ganga, and it mitigates all three doshas. Water that has opposite qualities is called Samudra, or salty water, brackish water. It has an alkaline or salty taste. It leads to loss of semen and loss of visual acuity. It has a bad smell. It aggravates all three doshas. It has a sharp or tikshna quality and is not beneficial for treatments. During July to August, this water is said to have properties of Ganga water due to influence of the Agastya constellation, which is to have a mitigating effect on otherwise what should not be drinkable water. Unseasonal rainwater. If there's rainwater that comes out of the normal season, it is called anartava, and unseasonal, and it will tend to aggravate doshas. So even if we are inside the house and dry, it will tend to aggravate dosha. So if there's rainwater out of normal season, it will tend to be aggravating. Water from hailstones. The combination of water, air, and fire in the atmosphere causes water to solidify and fall down like stones. These are called karaka, or hail, and are considered like amrita, or nectar. Water from melted hailstones causes dryness. It is clear, or vishada, heavy for digestion, guru, fixed, stira, cold, shitala, dense, sandra, reduces pitta, and increases vata and kapha. So these are some of the differentiations for water from melted hailstones. Tushara jala is water from condensation. Water vapor from rivers evaporated by the action of fire and water without steam is called tushara. That is when you have very suspended fine droplets or dew condensation. Water from dew is not good for the health of animals, but it is good for plants. It's cold in potency, causes dryness, increases vata, and slightly increases pitta, cures diseases arising from kapha, and is good for stiffness of legs, diseases of the throat, maladies of digestive fire, diabetes, swollen lymph glands, etc. Hima, or snowfall. Now, of course, Haimajala is very common, and you're going to get this in the mountains a lot. When you have water which falls in mountains like the Himalayas, Hima is the word for snow. The mountain range in India are called the Himalayas. Literally, it means the abode of snow. So water from snowmelt is known as Haimanjala or Himambu. So if you've ever been up to some place, like, I don't know if you've ever been up to Mount Rainier, there's a place where you can get water coming off the glacier. And, you know, if you can get some of that water, it's very cold, very clear, very tasty. There are places in the Himalayas where you can get, you know, water that's coming directly out of a glacier, and it has not come in contact with anything else. And there are properties of that water. It's cold in potency, it mitigates pitta, it's heavy for digestion, and increases vata. Others say that seawater vaporized by the action of Agni brought by breezes over land and becoming solid is called Hima. You know, this is a very old description. This is coming from, although the book is only 500 or 600 years old, this is relating the common wisdom of the times that has come from very ancient times, that is understood as really part of the earth science explanation of how snow is formed. Such hima water is cold in potency, causes dryness, and has the gunas of hardness, or daruna, and fineness, sukshma. It does not increase vata, pitta, or kapha. Bhaumajala. Now this is the other major category of water, or groundwater. Groundwater is further divided in three subtypes: Jangala, from desert-like lands; Anupa, from marshy lands; Sadharana, from temperate lands. Jangala is land where there is very little water, small trees, and where people suffer from diseases of pitta and rakta. Anupa is that land where there is plenty of water, large trees, and where people suffer from diseases of vata and kapha. So this is a distinction of the type of land where you get groundwater. Now, how do you get groundwater? You can have groundwater from an artesian well. You can have groundwater from a spring. For example, I don't know if any of you have spent any time in Florida. The state of Florida in the U.S. has no mountains, but it has rivers. So where do the rivers come from? The rivers are not coming from snow melt on mountains. The highest point in the entire state is, I think, about 400 feet above sea level, which, if the tendency for ocean levels to rise increases, the whole state of Florida could be underwater. But Florida has rivers which are entirely spring-fed, and most of the state of Florida has an aquifer. There's porous limestone beneath the state, and there are systems of underwater caves and springs, and you have very remarkably clear rivers. When water has come down from mountains, it picks up a lot of mud and soil along the way, and it will not be completely clear. By the time you get to a large river, the Mississippi River in the U.S., the water is not clear. But the rivers in Florida are very clear. They are like, you can see all the way to the bottom clear, shockingly clear, because they're coming from springs. So this is really Bhaumajala. It is not Haimajala, it is Bhaumajala, or groundwater. So the type of land from which you get, either via a spring-fed river or a spring or an artesian well or a well, is also energetically going to have some influence depending on the type of land. So there's a description of lands that are somewhat dry, where there's not so much water, where the trees are small, and there are diseases of pitta and rakta because it is generally going to be a very hot place. Anupa, this is going to be a more moderate climate. There is more water, there's large trees. People may have diseases of vata and kapha. It may be temperate. There may be not so hot all the time. Sometimes it may be more cold. This is going to be a problem for kapha and vata persons. So Jangala Salila, or water from dry lands, will cause dryness. It tends to be salty, easy to digest. It mitigates pitta. It increases the digestive fire. It mitigates afflictions arising from kapha, and it is generally good for health. Anupavati, or water from swampy wetlands, causes accumulation of moisture, has gunas of sweet, oily, thick, and heavy for digestion. It will increase kapha, causes diseases of kapha origin, and is good for the heart. Now, when we're talking about properties of water, this is not something that's going to be a shockingly visible effect. These are fairly subtle effects. It is water, and if you observe, if you have sanitary water, it shouldn't cause health problems. But we look at kind of the subtle properties or energetic properties of water according to different sources. That is really the whole point of going through the vari-varga from Bhava-prakash, is to think about the origins of water and the energetic properties. Sadharana jala, or water from temperate lands, has gunas of being sweet, increasing digestive fire, cold in potency, easy to digest, nourishing, helps taste, relieves thirst, relieves burning sensation, and mitigates all three doshas. River water. So now we are talking about river water. You know, remember I mentioned before about spring-fed rivers. Those are really unusual. Usually when we're talking about river waters, we're talking about water of rivers that have flown down from, flown from mountains. So water of nadi, rivers which are flowing south and east, and nada, rivers flowing west from central mountains, is called nadea, or river water. River water causes dryness, increases vata, is easy to digest, increases digestive fire, does not cause accumulation of internal moisture, is clear, visada, pungent, katu, and mitigates kapha and pitta. Now, of course, this is in this time, this river water was categorized this way. In modern times, having water from small streams will often be contaminated by parasites such as Giardia, and so it's it really is very environmental and very localized. So obviously, you do not want to have water that has parasites in it. That's the number one cause of diseases from drinking water which has not been filtered or processed. Water of rivers which flow swiftly are easily digestible, laghu. They have and have pure amala water, but water from rivers which flow slowly is hard to digest, or guru. Rivers that come from the Himalayas are healthy since their path is through rocks. These include the Ganga, Shatadru, Sarayu, Yamuna, etc., and these are superior in quality. Rivers from the Sahya Mountains, the western Ghats, such as Vena and Godavari, may give rise to skin diseases and increase vata and kapha slightly. Now this is giving the example of specific rivers specific to the geography of India, but it may apply in other places as well. For example, water that comes from the Rocky Mountains, Colorado River, is going to have more properties similar to the Ganga because the Rocky Mountains are very rocky. The water has acquired some minerals. It is less muddy. Once that water becomes very slow moving, as it's going through northern Arizona, for example, then it's going to have these other qualities of being more difficult to digest. Other kinds of water, and there are good and bad qualities of water from rivers, lakes, ponds, wells, streams, and these can all be understood according to the nature of the land where these water sources are present. So basically, here is the basic theory that's being given. Look at the Bhoma-jala water that is coming from the ground according to the nature of the land where these water sources are present. So if you're getting water from the ground, always look at the nature of the land. That's kind of what you can expect. Now, an example of brackish water, there are parts of the US, especially in the east, where you have water that has a very high iron content. I don't know if any of you have been in those areas. There are places where you get well water, especially in rural parts of eastern US, and the water will have a very high iron content. I mean, it has a strong smell, it has a strong taste, it's very astringent, and people will frequently add a water softener system because otherwise you tend to get red stains in your laundry. It's that bad. So, again, it's related to the nature of the land in which the water source is found. Audbita Jala. Audbita Jala is spring water. Sages say that water which comes out in a spring bursting forth from the ground, an artesian spring or a normal spring, is called Audbhidajala. This water mitigates pitta, does not cause heartburn, is cold in potency, enlivening, sweet, strengthening, increases vata slightly, and is easily digestible. You know, spring water is popular. People will get spring water. They feel there's energetically something different about it. And according to Ayurveda, there is. You know, people who work in labs will say, well, there's not really any difference. It's just water. It's just H2O. And there may be some mineral properties, some minerals that exist in it as well. Nairjara. Nairjara is water which flows down the slopes of mountains. This is called prasravana or nairjara. This water helps taste. It mitigates kapha. It augments digestive fire. It's easy to digest or lagu, sweet. It has a pungent vipak, and it increases vata but not pitta. Rivers which are obstructed in their course by mountains form saras, or lakes. Lakes are often covered by lotuses. Water from natural lakes, or sarasajala, gives strength, mitigates thirst, is sweet in taste, easily digestible, or lagu. It helps taste. It is astringent, causes dryness, and blocks elimination of urine and stool. A reservoir of water at a clean and auspicious place which has existed for a long time is called a tadaga. The water of such ponds and reservoirs is sweet, astringent in taste, has pungent vipak, increases vata, blocks elimination of urine and stool, cures bleeding, and cures diseases of kapha origin. A large, deep, artificial reservoir made with stones or bricks and having flights of steps is called vapi. Water from such reservoirs or tanks, if alkaline in taste, increases pitta and mitigates kapha and vata. If sweet, it increases kapha and mitigates vata and pitta. In India, you'll find that from ancient times there had been many reservoirs constructed, and this is the common construction. You have usually a square reservoir, it's dug deep, and then there were stone steps made in it. So water will basically collect in the reservoir when it's rainy, and then people are able to go and take water out. Nowadays, it is sometimes, that should not have gone back. People sometimes do things like washing their clothes in a reservoir, and you were not ever supposed to do that. But, you know, things have just kind of, in ancient times, people would respect that this is a reservoir, this is a place to take water from. And so people will go and fill their water pots, and you know, the government would do projects of constructing these. And you'll find reservoirs in different places. They're sometimes referred to as tanks in India. And some of these have been existing for hundreds of years. Usually over time, they'll become filled up with silt. So unless they're maintained, they may not continue. Drinking water. We're coming up on the end here. So boiling water and then cooling makes the water lighter and easier to digest. Drinking hot water will mitigate vata and kapha. Drinking water from a vessel made of silver or ceramic is cooling. You know, it's really a uniquely American thing. People love to have ice water. I don't know why. Water room temperature is about as cold as you should ever have it. Ice water can be good sometimes if your body is just too hot and you've been out in the hot sun in the middle of summer and you desperately need to reduce your body temperature a little bit. Other than that, ice water is not a good thing, particularly not to have with a meal. Whoa. And that is the end. So I thank you very much. We are going to be again on a short break. And then Dr. Monica is going to do her presentation on lipids.